Hi. Good morning, Carol.
Morning, Ella.
I am so happy to see you today. Let me introduce everyone to what we're doing. I want to thank everyone for coming to the third session of 20 for 20 in 2020. I'm going to be asking 20 questions of 20 professionals who you might wish to choose from when you're thinking about some of the important decisions you're going to be making in your life. And as a result of these opportunities to meet these 20 professionals, which will include attorneys, accountants, financial advisors, and more, I plan to introduce you to them all before the end of 2020, which is going to be quite the challenge. Okay, I'm Ella Newman, and I'm a trusted insurance advisor with the firm Norton, the Norton Advisory Group, and I focus on creating effective solutions to retirement planning, estate planning, long-term care planning, and business succession planning concepts that you want to achieve goals in. And I am going to be providing you with something special at the end of the program in terms of an insurance review. So stay tuned and I'll tell you more about that later. In the meantime, our guest today is Carole Bass, and she is a partner with Moses and Singer in their trust and estate and matrimonial and family law practice in New York City. Carole has over 20 years experience in this field, an amazing set of credentials, and I have known her for many, many years. And we have worked on some very interesting concepts to help clients over the years. So how are you doing today in this busy fourth quarter? I really appreciate you working with me and balancing work and family in this time of the virus. How are you?
Thanks, Ella. It's certainly a challenge
I
in
can
these
imagine.
times.
Okay, well, we're going to get right into our questions. Are you ready?
Ready?
Okay, great. So let's get started. What would you say is the primary focus of your practice?
Okay, so the primary focus of my practice is really helping individuals and families to pass down wealth tax efficiently and efficiently in terms of family dynamics and other non-tax related purposes. So it's mostly estate planning, although I also do estate administration after death to help families through that period, and some surrogates court work when there are contests or other issues with estate plans. And I also do pre and post marital agreements.
That's great. Now, what led you to this career?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I've always practiced in trust and estates since I started. But when I went to law school, I had been an English major, and I actually have a master's degree from a journalism school in PR, and I wanted to do First Amendment law. That was really where I was headed. But in law school, I really just loved the coursework that was trust and estates related. I loved the idea of working with individuals rather than, big corporations. I like transactional work better than litigation. And so I think I made the choice then in law school that that's what I wanted to do.
That's great. So how did you get into working in your current firm?
So I got to my current firm because I knew Gideon Rothschild, who is a partner, one of the senior partners in our group, through the ABA, in which we're both, actively in leadership. And the head of our matrimonial group, Arlene Dubin, I knew because we had worked previously together in our prior firm. So that's kind of how I came to Moses and Singer when they were looking for someone. Before that, I had been at a really large international firm for 11 years. And before that, I was at a much smaller firm. So my career trajectory has kind of been a little different than the come out, be at a big firm, go to a mid-sized firm, so I kind of went backwards. So I was at a small firm, then a really large firm, and now I'm at a mid-sized firm, which has been great. I mean, of all the options in terms of firm size, I think for me, this has been the best because, we're small enough to be personal. We only have one office, but we have about 100 lawyers. So, we're large enough that we really can offer our clients full service in whatever they need. And individuals are individuals. They have needs that branch out beyond trust and estates. So it's been great.
That's wonderful. That's very helpful. And what would you say are some of the highlights of your career experience?
Oh, that's such a, it's a good question. And I hate to think about how long I've been doing this because it ages me, but, there's been a lot and, there've been a lot of great clients where, you really, I've really felt where I've helped them through, a difficult time. I think some of the highlights, have actually been in the pro bono work I've done. And Ella, that's how you and I really first got to know each other.
That's right.
Because we were both involved with the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
Right.
And I did some pro bono work for them. And I also did some work post September 11th with some of the families and the estates that were impacted by that. And I did some volunteer work at the Javits Center on the death certificate project for 9/11. And, it was really, really meaningful to be able to help, to apply what I do in a situation, like that. So I think that is something I'll always remember.
That's significant.
Yeah.
So what kind of clients do you tend to work with?
It's really, quite a range of clients. So, and the range of wealth is kind of broad as well. So I work with a lot of high net worth clients who have an estate tax issue because they're above the threshold, and then all the way kind of down to people who might have just a New York State estate tax issue. So, moderately wealthy, to younger people who are starting out and maybe don't have, a vast amount of wealth now, but are on a trajectory to kind of get there or have family wealth that will come to them. And in terms of what they do, it's really a range too. I work with professionals, business owners. I work with some people with inherited wealth, some, entertainers and athletes that have wealth, and artists through that. So it's really a range, which keeps it interesting.
Sounds terrific. So what are some of the problems or issues that you've actually helped clients address?
So a lot of the issues, right now that we're helping clients address is, the concern that the high net worth clients in particular have, that the estate tax exemption, which is currently $11.58 million per individual, is going to drop down drastically after the election, depending on what the results are. So right now I'm helping a lot of families find effective ways to utilize their exemption this year and pass down wealth to their children and future generations efficiently, while making sure that they are comfortable and feel like they have enough, to live on, and they're not giving away the farm, so to speak. So it's a little, depending on the amount of net worth, it can be a little bit of a balance. But that's a lot of what, we're seeing right now. And on the more traditional basic planning need, I help people a lot of times to figure out what they want their will or revocable trust to say in terms of where the assets are going, concerns they might have about their family, their children, their in-laws, and so on, and how to manage the passage of wealth so that everybody's protected as best they can be.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
When you're working when you're working on an estate plan, what goes into the process?
Yeah, so it starts really with a meeting, or nowadays a Zoom call or a phone call with the client, sometimes with the client and another advisor, to kind of get a sense of what the assets are that make up their estate and what their tax situation is, and a sense of the family and what's going on, there. I work often with blended families where there's some more complexity as well. And then, trying to see what their goals and objectives are and formulating a plan, that so we can put that into effect. So that's kind of phase one. Then would be the preparation of the documents and review of drafts. And then ultimately we get to signing and funding and all of that.
That's very helpful. How would you assist clients with funding assets into their trusts?
Yeah, so this depends a lot on what their team consists of, or whether sometimes there's a financial advisor or someone who's kind of quarterbacking. And so we just deal with that person and make sure they're getting all the funding done. But sometimes we'll be more hands-on with the client. So with revocable trusts, that's just a will substitute where they're putting all their assets in that title. We can help deal with the brokerage firms and the banks to retitle. We can do the deeds to transfer the home, and deal with partnerships or whatever other interest they are in assigning those in.
Right. Do you actively help them execute their goals?
In terms of the funding?
Well, you finish the funding sort of in terms of what they're trying to achieve. How do you get involved in that? Sort of.
I mean,
if they're thinking about, in some cases it might be, well, we'll probably address this later, but maybe they have charitable goals, maybe they have goals about inheritance in terms of their children, that kind of goal.
Right. So for the most part, that would be all kind of talked through and then incorporated into the documents, so that everything at the time would pass in accordance with those goals. Sometimes there is communication, between generations, or a meeting to kind of communicate those goals down. Not all families are receptive to that, so that's really depends if you can really get that going. So sometimes, in terms of charitable goals, some clients are charitably inclined, so we can work with them either in including charitable bequests in the documents, in doing pledge agreements, or naming rights, things like that. For some clients, we'd be forming foundations, although nowadays we're seeing a lot less of that and a lot more people using donor advised funds. So we do help on that end too, explaining how the donor advised funds work, and suggesting that a lot of times where people might be thinking foundation, but it wouldn't be as effective, and so presenting the options.
Okay, that's very helpful. Okay, do you provide a formal updating and reviews and maintenance programs for your clients?
So most of it's not really a formal process. We have periodic newsletters and alerts that go out to clients with some suggestions that might apply to certain people, and updating as to changes in the law that go out in that form. There are some clients and families with whom I have much more regular contact, then there's much more kind of periodic updating going on. So in that case, yes. But that's really, the process. And of course, if clients come, to us, we tell people really it's a good idea to review your documents that's 3 to 5 years, or whenever there's a major life event. So often we'll have clients come back just for that kind of review.
That makes sense. So what is it like to work with you initially and then in the long run?
Good question. I try to, develop a relationship with my clients, to get to know them and their families, and be, responsive to their needs, and kind of help them through what they need. I have a good relationship with my clients. I think they feel comfortable speaking to me, calling me, and talking to me about, some very personal issues in terms of finances and in terms of, concerns about the family. You really have to have a personality fit with an estate planning attorney. I think it's a lot different than a commercial litigation attorney. We really know, everything. We're sometimes part psychologists, and you have to kind of like each other and have that kind of fit to make it work.
That makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So how do you determine your fees, and what do they include?
Yeah, so for the most part, we charge based on hourly work and how long we spend working on a project. Although for certain types of planning, we can do a flat fee arrangement. So it depends. But we try to let clients know upfront when it's going to be hourly, kind of what the range will be. And then we go from there.
Okay, that's fair. And what are some of the experiences you've had in mitigating or dealing with estate taxes?
A lot right now. So like I mentioned earlier, right now we're doing a lot of gifting, a lot of completed gifts for people to reduce the size of their estates, so that if the exemption drops down, they will have, used the higher exemption amount and have gotten that wealth out of their estate. We also use a lot of techniques that can reduce future appreciation from the estate. So maybe they're not transferring or giving up the whole asset now, but some of the future wealth will pass out to the kids or to whomever. Some charitable planning. Within the basic estate plan as well, there's tax planning, so that the exemption amount would pass into a trust that can benefit the surviving spouse and the kids, but not be includable in the surviving spouse's estate. And then usually providing for a marital trust for the balance that will defer the tax until the second spouse dies. That's kind of your basic tax plan, without getting into more bells and whistles.
Right, understand. And as you know, I like to help out with some of the insurance strategies that tie into some of those planning
Absolutely
efforts. Okay. What do you include in creating an estate plan? Wills, trusts, life insurance, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so the basic plan would really be a will, or a will with a revocable trust, and then powers of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, a HIPAA release. That's kind of your basic package for an estate plan.
Right, that makes sense.
And sometimes, as you mentioned, with the insurance, and oftentimes it'll include a life insurance trust as well.
Right, okay. And what are your views about revocable living trusts?
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's changing so much in New York. So when I first started practicing, we always did wills in New York, and we would say, oh, other states always use a rev trust, but in New York, probate's not too expensive. It's not too much of a hassle. The courts are pretty quick. Um, but the courts have gotten really very, very backlogged. Um, and so probate itself with a will takes a lot longer. And also what we're finding is that not only probate takes longer, but if you need to come back, if you have a trust, a testamentary trust created under the will, and you need to go back to the court to change the trustees, the process can take up to a year to change trustees to get it through, even if everybody's consented. And that can really be bad for clients. So with a rev trust, you don't have that. If you want to change trustees, it's all internal paperwork, and it can happen, very quickly. So we're starting to use those a lot more. In terms of probate avoidance, clients have to fully fund the trust. So everything needs to be transferred in, and all the assets need to be retitled in order to avoid probate. But even if you miss some of the assets and you still have to probate, you do avoid the other problem of having to change trustees and so on and so forth down the road. So there's still some effectiveness to it, although it's most effective if everything gets transferred in.
Right.
But, for instance, sometimes clients own a co-op, and the process for dealing with the co-op board to transfer the apartment would be so onerous that we keep that outside. It really depends on the assets.
That's very useful. I can see. And it has been a transition, as you've pointed out, and it's different in different states, as you pointed out.
Yes, absolutely.
Very interesting. What are some other issues you address?
Well, I mentioned I deal with, blended families sometimes. So I address, issues that relate to those situations. So if there are, let's say, children from both, if there's a joint asset, people need to be thinking about how they're titling things, right? Because a joint asset would pass to the surviving spouse, and then he or she could leave everything to his or her own kids and leave out the others. Whereas if they hold it as co-tenants and each has a 50% interest, they can make sure that half goes to one side and half goes to the other side. To think about when there's a much younger spouse, that if everything goes in trust for that spouse, the kids might have to wait a very long time to receive anything. So it might make sense in that case to have insurance or something else go to the kids, so at least they get something right away. So there are some special issues there. Like I said, I also do prenup, so I deal with that, which is a lot of T&E lawyers do them, but that's a little different from our estate planning and estate admin side. It's a situation where we have two sides. A lot of what we do on the trust and estate side is just us and the client. With the prenup, it's a little more of your traditional kind of lawyerly work where you're negotiating back and forth with another side. So it's interesting and different in that way. And it's I think the prenups are really becoming much more prevalent now as people marry later in life and have separate wealth that they want to protect. Their children have divorced themselves, so they want to be protective and not have happen to them what happened to their parents. So we're seeing a lot more activity there, and it's helpful, and it's interesting to work with different couples and kind of help them through understanding the financial issues and in understanding how they each think about money and being able to speak to each other. We try to make it kind of collaborative. So
that's great. That sounds very important and helpful to the people you work with. How long will it take you to complete an estate planning process?
Yeah, so that really can vary based on I guess, on our workload. Like right now, unfortunately, because we're doing a lot of year end, the basic estate plan that's not time sensitive might take a little bit longer. But basically, if the client is responsive and gets us all the information and answers all the questions, it would probably turn around in about a month, maybe. But again, sometimes people get stalled on certain issues. Who's going to be the trustee? Who's going to be the guardian? Things like that. And so there's some more back and forth that kind of delays it.
Yeah. Right. It's a complex process, I'm sure. Okay. So when do you sort of send out the estate planning documents to the client to review, or do you?
No, we do. So yes, so after we meet and talk about it, all the decisions are made, then the drafts are drawn up, they go out to the client for review, and then after they've had a chance to review, we would meet or speak again to kind of review the documents, answer any questions, make any changes, and then they would be, once we have everything finalized, then we would sign.
That makes sense.
Right. And we found new ways to sign now during COVID.
Yes. You have to.
We've done a lot of virtual signings, which are allowed by executive order of the governor. So we've done a lot of signings on Zoom. It's been interesting.
Fascinating. Now, who in your office would discuss your clients' issues if you, in your absence, let's say?
Yeah, so, depending again on staffing, a lot of times there'll be a more junior lawyer assigned to the client who's familiar with the documents and the plan and the client's family, and they can respond to questions as well and handle things if I'm not there. But we have a lot of depth in our department. It's a big department, especially given the size of the firm. So there is always someone there who can help if, for some reason I wasn't available.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, last but not least, what can you tell us about yourself that we cannot find on the internet?
That is, I wonder what other people think.
It's interesting. I've gotten some good answers on that.
What can oh my goodness. I am an avid Mets fan. I love baseball. I have 2 boys. They both play baseball, which makes me so happy. They love it. So I guess that's what I can say.
That's good to know. Oh, great. I don't think I knew that before this moment.
Yeah.
So
yeah, my guys really love it. They've really picked that up.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have 2 sons as well, so they're definitely sports fans, but I must admit we're Yankee fans.
That's okay.
But that's great. Well, Carole, this has been fantastic. Carole, this was a great opportunity to have our people listening to find out about you, your practice, your firm. Could you tell them how the best way to contact you is?
Sure. So you can contact me by email, which is always probably the best way. And it's cbass@mosessinger.com, or my office number is 212-554-7877. So you could always call me at the office. Yeah.
Great. So what I would suggest is that people go to your website and my website if they want to get more information. And so I promised everybody I would mention something about a review of their insurance, and that's what I want to offer at this point in time. We are in the 4th quarter of this year. There are going to be a lot of potential changes next year, possibly. There's also the economic environment, the interest rate environment. These are all reasons that if you haven't looked at your current insurance in the last 3 or 4 years, you should definitely review it. And a fiduciary review is important. We do that on a complimentary basis. So if you reach out to me at ella@nortonadvisorygroup.com, I can set up a virtual opportunity to set up an appointment and offer you that type of a review. And that would be great. And in the meantime, I'm looking forward to doing more of my 20 for 20 in 2020. And I will see you on LinkedIn. And again, please look at our websites and and Carole, this has been great. And I want everyone to stay healthy and make arrangements to vote. And thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Ella, so much for the opportunity to join you this morning.
I appreciate your being here.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Is it still recording?